December 28th, 1895. This is the day that most film historians say film began. This is workers leaving the factory by the Lumiere brothers. It's considered one of the first movies ever made and ever released to a paying audience in a theater.
Wow.
So this is episode 14.
Yes, 14.
So, and it's about the Lumiere brothers. The Lumiere brothers were the guys that were credited as being the first filmmakers ever to release a movie to a paying audience on December 28th, 1895. So let me explain why I'm going to go back to 1895.
Okay.
As you know, I'm doing a lot of stuff. I've been doing a lot of stuff on Letterboxd, writing a lot of reviews and making some quick lists and stuff.
Right.
And every time I do a list, I want to do it chronologically. So it's like I always like to start at the earliest ones and then move to the current ones.
Right.
And I was like, you know what? I want to go back all the way to the beginning. So I
where
went back
film
to
started. So yes, you do it the correct way.
Yeah, I don't like to bounce around because it kind of it builds if you go in chronological order, but
it should, unless they really screw up a remake. But I'm totally with you on that. Like if they're doing their job correctly, the first one is good, but the third one is better.
In our last episode 13, we did the Oz Film Manufacturing Company.
Yes, Oz, more Oz.
This is another one of my quick lists. I know we talked extensively about quick lists in episode 13.
You could make a long video about a quick list. So yeah,
yes,
I totally get it. So Phil and I did an episode 13, and we were deciding how we were going to do stuff. And that is the QR code to watch it. It has stuff about quick lists and all the different things that are going to be happening in the show. And then, of course, Phil was nice enough to let me put this one on the screen. That's for me. That's the TP show. You can tell it's the TP show because it's got a little thing that goes like, oh, well, we're not going to go any farther than that. So the TP show, every week, the professor and me, my name's Tick, also known as Rich Shoemaker, we put on a podcast. And our podcast is what we call reaction podcast. So we have a wide variety of topics that we think all guys and some girls, actually a lot of girls, will find hilariously funny. We have Ouch and Oops and Drunks. Drunks is one of my favorite segments because you never know what's going to happen when somebody gets drunk. And I have many a story about getting a little too tipsy, and they always seem to end up on the show. And so you need to tune in every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, otherwise known as the Happy Days time slot for people that are of my generation, which is old people. And so that's what we do. And the professor... I press fancy buttons, and the professor pushes my fancy buttons, is what he says. That's what he says in the intro, but I don't think so. He just makes me laugh.
It's a great show, everyone. Go check it out.
Okay, let's start here, and let's start literally at the beginning of film.
And I think that's important. I just think people should see these films and understand what it was like at the start.
I think when I think about things like this, I see kids with one of these, which is any standard phone. You know what I mean? I have every kind of standard phone around me. And kids today are like, hey, I took a picture. Hey, I took a video. Hey, I did this. And they don't actually understand how complicated that was. It was not an easy task, even when I was a kid. So like if you wanted to become a filmmaker, your only option was to shoot on, wait for it. Is anybody looking around? On film. So the Lumiere brothers are the first people that ever said, hey, we're going to take a still picture and we're going to go and make film. And they weren't the very first, but as you said, they were the first to put on a film fest. And back to Phil. So that's your Letterboxd location. That QR code right there is your Letterboxd location. And
we're going to try and go through 1,500 years real quick.
Dude, that's awesome.
And we're going to take it all the way up to 1895, where this list begins. And we're going to have some fun today. So, like I said, this movie festival that the Lumiere brothers did happened on December 28th, 1895. Each film in this quick list is like a minute, less than a minute each. So right there is 10 minutes. If you want to throw it, if you want to double that for searching on YouTube, 20 minutes, okay? To fill out the hour, I went looking for a movie that was an actual motion picture that talked about the history of film. It was like produced in the 1946.
Wow.
But then it looks like the U.S. Navy took it and re-released it in 1950, and the U.S. Army did it and re-released it in 1955. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to explain some of the stuff that happened in film history that got us to 1895 before movies began. And
so before we get to this film fest, we're going to go back in time, and Phil's going to tell us about the history of film. So we're going to be saying Phil and film a lot, so don't get confused. Phil is Phil, film is film. Just telling you right now, we're going to be talking about Phil, and we're going to be talking about film. So
also, the Lumiere brothers are French filmmakers, so there's going to be a lot of French words that we're going to mangle, including
I am mangling them more than you are. The Lumiere brothers, the Lumiere brothers. I've mangled their names more than you have.
Okay, how about you roll the open, and when we get back, we'll get started. Hey, Rich, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Phil?
I'm good.
Let me just make sure that I understand where we're at. We're going back to where the image is captured originally. We're not talking about the Lumiere brothers right now. We're not talking about motion right now. We're literally going back to pictures 101, how they started. Okay, so now we're back 1,500 years. Holy mackerel. Okay.
Have you ever heard of the phenomenon known as camera obscura?
Actually, you know what's funny about it is I had heard of camera obscura from a YouTube ad. Oddly enough, there's this little device that you clamp onto the side of a table, and then you go like this, and it comes up and over, and it's got a little prism, and you put your pencil on the page, and then I see a picture of you, and then the picture of you's right here, and I draw you right here. It is the craziest device. So when you told me about it, I was like, wait, that's the same thing, but way before. So before we get to the YouTube clamp it on a thing, tell me about camera obscura. Because like I said, I think I know about it, but I probably don't.
Camera obscura is a phenomenon that was pretty much discovered by accident. Actually, it sounds like they really actually can't explain how it happens, but it does. So you basically have a black box or a room, and you need to make sure that the box and the room have no light in them. They have to be light tight. And then what you do is you put a tiny little pinhole in the one wall that's facing like a light source. Apparently the light will come in, and I guess through some kind of refraction or whatever, will put the image up on the next wall over. Depending on how close it is, it'll be in focus or not.
Okay,
it's not a perfect. It's not a perfect image, but it's close enough. And it was discovered by accident by people, 1,200-1,300 years ago, because you're living in like a house that has no windows, or you're living in a cave. I guess one morning they woke up and there was just enough light coming through a pinhole that they saw this phenomenon going on, and it was always dark.
They didn't have electric lights. They didn't have gas. They didn't have any of that stuff. So it was dark when it was dark. It was light when it was light. And so now it's daytime, and we're wanting to get some sleep. So and you got to figure out how to block out the sun. Because right now, the sun is blinding me. I can't sleep. People wanted to sleep during the daytime. They only had daytime and nighttime. They block up the entrance to their cave or whatever they're in. And a little tiny hole was left by accident, let's just say. And they're sleeping. And on the wall is everything outside. So all the predators that are walking by, they can see everything. It's like early CCTV. It's like CCTV for like the Stone Age. And when you first told me about this, I'm like, how would that actually have happened? Meaning that most of the time they always tell you they sleep during the sleep time and they're awake during the awake time. Meaning that like the sun comes up and the farmer gets up and he goes and he farms. And then the farmer's done at the end of the day and he goes to bed and he sleeps. And I'm like, how would this have happened back in the day? And it makes a lot more sense that they would stay up at night so that the predators didn't attack them and they would sleep during the day, especially if they could do this camera obscura thing. You're sleeping during the day, you block up the hole and you still have CCTV on the wall. And this is back in the Stone Ages, basically, because you didn't have cell phones. Let's put it that way. That's we'll call that the Stone Ages, no cell phones.
So as the centuries went by, they started putting like lenses on their camera obscuras and they were able to focus it even more. And they would have this image, and of course they eventually figured out to take mirrors to flip the image.
That makes a lot of sense.
So they put mirrors up, and it turns out that a lot of popular famous painters of the day, it turns out they may have been tracing. There's plenty of videos on YouTube of people doing it. You can do it in a room in your house. Pick a room in your house that has just one window, and cover it up completely with like a piece of plastic, so that there's no light coming in at all. And put some rags down at the other door or whatever if there's light coming in through there. And then you go up to the window and you just make a little hole, maybe the size of a dime, and it'll come through. It refracts, I guess, and is up on the wall upside down. Now, speaking of the portable version, so as the centuries went by, they were able to take the big room and turn it into a smaller box. And eventually they created a thing called the Magic Lantern. The Magic Lantern is basically the portable version of the camera obscura. So it was a box with like a candle, and it would shoot the light through. They already figured out the idea of projection, of projecting an image on the wall, of having a story or whatever happen on the wall.
And then they just figured out how to make it smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until they could literally just carry it around with them wherever they went.
And they created this Magic Lantern. And as time went by, they figured out how to make lenses. Like eyeglass lenses go as far back as 700 BC. Like
now you bring up
ones.
Yeah, you bring up something interesting. Could you imagine a modern day equivalent of this? Just a dude carrying around a lantern and he presses a button and then it just shines a single image like on a wall. And he's just standing there like, hey, you want to take a selfie? I got this light here. That's a crazy invention. Like how we've gone from a room down to a box, down to you carry it around now. How do we get something on there though that we can show? Like how do we do that?
Well, basically the Magic Lantern had a spot where you put a candle and that was your light source, and then that would go through the lens that they put on it, and then it would shine up on the wall. And they had the slides, as you were saying, but they could layer them so that they could move them around so it looked like stuff was moving on top of the background.
So it's like when you take those pieces of acetate and you like draw a picture on one, like a background, and the background goes like this back and forth or whatever. And then you put like Fred Flintstone on top, and Fred Flintstone's driving in the car on top of the background. So now I'm getting it. I didn't understand how that worked. So now that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so as the years went by, they used this kind of projection at shows and in theaters and whatever, or they had like private parties and people would come down and they would watch this slideshow. There was
you just made me, no, you slayed me there, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm thinking about a modern day like show, and like it's laser lights and it's like animation and stuff's popping out of the screen, and this dude comes out with a lamp. Just puts a lamp down. Everybody's like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, everybody probably went nuts. They're like, "Yeah, we're gonna watch a show." Yeah,
and and the band gets up there, boom, 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 boom.
So about 500 years ago, your entertainment was stuff like Magic Lantern. They also went through an era of shadow puppet theater. They did shadow puppet theater. They still
do that in Japan. Japan has a long tradition of shadow puppets and puppetry in general. So go ahead. I mean, here in America, puppetry is one of those, like, it's a lost art form / ventriloquism's huge / horror movies are huge. Those are like, it went in very specific directions here in the United States. You either became like a ventriloquist or you created horror movies.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were using the concept of projection all the way back, and it was being modified as we went along. But a couple centuries more had to go by before they could really start getting closer to what motion pictures were. So obviously the next step is photography. And we finally get into the 1800s, and in the mid to late 1830s, they discovered photography. They invented photography. The daguerreotype was invented. Louis
That's
Daguerre.
metal, isn't it? Isn't it on metal or is it on glass?
It was like I think it was like a metal plate or a glass plate. And
they had chemicals, right? Didn't they pour like chemicals on it? Because I remember we took photography class and they talked about that stuff where they would take the liquid, and it had to be light tight, obviously. So they had to do it like in a room, and they would make a plate. And then that plate would be in another light tight box. And then they put those two light tight boxes into another light tight box. And then they would take the cartridge off. So now you're ready for the picture taking time. And they got this big Hawken lens like right here. And they go, okay, nobody breathe. Okay, Phil, we're going to take a selfie. It's no breathing. Not even, I see you breathing. And action. So selfies back in the day took 5 seconds to 10 seconds, sometimes 30 seconds.
That's very true. They had to sit still, I think, longer than that.
And you didn't sit still. You're going to look like one of those ghost images, like... Okay, the most interesting thing I've heard recently, I don't know if you've heard of these before, but they're called the dead portraits. It was big during that time frame when it took 30 seconds to do a picture to have your dead relative, and you would sit next to your dead relative. Now, here's the funny part. The dead relative is perfectly still in the image, but all the other people look like ghosts.
Yeah.
So the living people look like ghosts, and the dead person looks like the living person. It's crazy. Yeah. So now we're on to a plate, but that doesn't get us up on a screen. So we got to get there. So photography became photography when it went onto paper, like decades later.
But when they refer to these older image, like the daguerreotype and the Ambrose type and tin types, they refer to them as photography, even though the word photography didn't exist at the time until they got to paper.
I get you. So they went back and they rewrote what originally was, and now everybody's learned it that way. That's the way it is. When in reality, if you and I went back and said, hey, I need to get a photo taken, where's your local photographer? They would look at us like, you guys are crazy.
You would probably have to say like the local cameraman or something like that.
I bet you any amount of money, it's the only dude that does stuff for the newspaper and things. Do you know what I mean? So I bet you'd go to the newspaper and be like, you take pictures here, right? Or you put, I don't even know what you would call them.
The daguerreotypes were like the late 1830s. The ambrotypes were like 1855 to 1865. And then there was the tin types where they would put an image on, obviously, tin. And that started in like the 1850s. And that actually kind of continued on into the 1900s because it became kind of a novelty, you know, like if you go down to the boardwalk. So basically they figured out how to save an image. A lot of this was trial and error too. Like a couple of these inventors would try and do something and then put like chemicals on their rock or whatever, and nothing would happen. And then they would go to bed and wake up the next morning and oh my Lord, there's an image on here because it needed time to bake. We'll take a little break and we'll come back and I'll come back and rock the world or something like that. I think everyone's heard the story of Edward Muybridge and the horse pictures, where they wanted to figure out if the horse's hooves are off the ground for a split second. Edward Muybridge was a photographer. He made a bet with another guy about...
Why is it always a bet? It's never like, I am going to do something for science and mankind. And this dude's like, dude, I bet you $15 you can't.
I'm pretty sure they were like really into horse racing too, so I think that's why they made it a bet. But
Probably,
the bet was,
how can we cheat at horse racing? It was probably how it all started. But go ahead. So Muybridge,
yeah,
horses. I'm with you.
yes. So the bet was to figure out if all four hooves were off the ground for a split second. So what they did was they set up 24 cameras, all with like wires or strings on the ground.
Right. Yep.
And when the horse ran through, he triggered all the cameras. And they took a picture of one at a time, and they took them out and they put them on a reel and spun it around, and they could tell that the horse's hooves, they proved it, the horse's hooves were off the ground at a split for a split second.
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, it's almost like the horse flies from one jump to the next. You know what I mean? They're like, it's like all four hit, and then like and then it takes off. And it depends on the gallop too. I remember they had like all different kinds of gallops that they were trying out and stuff like that. What I find interesting about this is what's old is new again. 1999, a movie that's near and dear to my heart. I will watch it for the rest of my life. Matrix used this exact same technique. I mean, literally the very first person going, okay, I need to make motion pictures. How do I do that? And then a guy in 1999 goes, okay, I need to stop time. How would I stop time? And they're like, take 24 pictures at the same time. Yeah. And that's what they did. If you watch the documentary, they took 24 pictures and they just went one picture, next picture, next picture, next picture, next picture, all the way in a circle. So you see like she's in midair. And then Carrie Ann Moss is not in midair anymore. Trinity has fallen to the ground. Does Trinity... Okay, so here's the question. Trinity kicks the ass of 7 cops. Does she ever leave this ground? Okay, let's set up 24 cameras and we'll check. It's the same concept.
Well, I'm happy to report no animal was harmed in the making of this film. And I'm also happy to report that they solved the mystery that the horse was, in fact, off the ground for a split second. And it added fuel to the idea of moving pictures. They took all these little photographs, put them together, and it made motion. So during this era, this time, Louis Lumiere, who was only 17 years old at the time, figured out how to make his own photography plates. So they took that photography plate and his family turned it into a huge factory, a huge business.
So basically the kids that made the thing sold the thing and made the new thing, meaning that they made plates and they made a process to do the plates, and then they sold thousands of them to everybody because they did that processing.
The Lumiere family was already making plates, photography plates. So they built an empire on this, actually. So George Eastman of Eastman Kodak, he was the one that came up with the roll of film.
Rochester, New York.
He came up with the first film with emulsion, and that's when they realized they could make multiple prints because they could save it on on the film, on the negative.
Okay, so here's a trivia question for you. When you were taking photography in school, besides bulk loading, because that's cheating, because you could answer any question you wanted, how many shots would you roll onto film? Like, you got to roll a film at the store. Let me say it that way. You go to the store and they give you Ektachrome. Here's some Ektachrome. That was my dad's. He used to shoot slides all the time. Yeah. How many pictures were there in Ektachrome or Kodachrome or any of the print films?
Well, the standard was the 24 shots on a roll of film.
Yes. And then the extended roll. Go ahead. Yeah, the big roll.
You could get up to 36 on the big roll. Yep. And I believe there was a smaller roll too. You could do 12 or something like that, but that could have been.
There was a short roll. Short roll was 12. No. It totally had 12, and that is for 35 millimeter, which was the standard film that most people used when I was a kid. Although my first film camera was what I call the potato of film cameras. Do you know what the potato of film cameras is?
No.
110 Instamatic. If you've never owned a 110 Instamatic, then you have no idea what I'm talking about. But a 35 millimeter piece of film, let's just say it's this big. A 110 film in the same size is like this big. They are the tiniest little things.
the bigger your negative is, the more sharper it is. So those little 110s were not very sharp.
And for you kids out there, megapixels, 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 baby.
Yes, megapixels. Yes, the more megapixels, the more
the
sharpness.
better. No, I agree. Basically, understanding where film came from makes it easier to understand where it's going to go, because all of these things come around over and over and over again.
So they made some headway with the film now. They have the film reels now, and they can shoot film or pictures in succession. They can have a moving image. And Louis LaPrince, he is credited as being the guy that made the first movies.
Okay.
And came up with the first film camera. So Louis is getting ready to get his camera and his projector and all his stuff patented, and he steps onto a train, the Orient Express or whatever, a train, and he vanishes forever, never to be seen from again.
Dude, total conspiracy theory. Okay, so he literally has the invention in his hand, and he gets on a train, and he never gets off the train.
They made a movie about it. I forget
Murder on the Orient Express. Say it was Murder on the Orient Express. It's the only movie I knew on an Oriental Express. So
there is a movie about it, so you'll have to find it.
We'll have to check it out. Yeah, no, I there's lots of murder train movies, so I totally believe that there's a murder train movie. Murder Train.
So as the decades went by, a conspiracy theory did kind of develop where they were saying that they think Edison had him rubbed out. Edison had him taken care of because that would give Edison the way in to be.
So for anybody in the audience, this means allegedly. Anything that Phil says, I'm saying allegedly. Please do not sue us, Edison estate. Allegedly, he had him murdered in a conspiracy that we heard. Wait for it, on the internet.
Yeah, no, they've had conspiracies forever, you know.
Right. Even before the internet? They had conspiracies before the internet? Yeah, no way. That can't be possible.
That one took root. And so speaking of Edison, Edison was working with one of his guys, William K.L. Dixon. Okay. They invented the kinetograph and the kinetoscope. The kinetograph. The kinetograph was the camera, and the kinetoscope was the projector.
Okay, so one is the acquisition, and one is the distribution. I get it.
Exactly.
So was the camera just like the other cameras then? You pointed at stuff? There was nothing super special about it?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much the same deal. Okay. You filmed your stuff.
Then let's look on the distribution side. How did that work? Like, describe this machine to me. I need to know more.
Well, Edison kind of missed the boat on being the first guy to have movies because he went in with the kinetoscope. And,
what is a kinetoscope, I guess, is my question.
What they did was your old Nickelodeon parlors that you used to hear about.
Dude, are you talking about, are you talking about all the stuff quiet on the set? Are you talking about that Nickelodeon scandal? What are you talking about?
No, not Nickelodeon, the TV network.
Oh, okay.
So in like 1894 or 1893 or 1894, they started opening up these parlors. Okay. And what that is it was a movie that would run through a projector, through a machine. But you would look at it through like a little eyepiece.
Oh, I've seen those before. They're on the boardwalk. Yeah. They've had those on the boardwalk. You put your head down and you look into them. Now, here's the funny part, Phil. There's not much difference between this and the Oculus Rift that I had on my face for like 4 hours the other day. Like, this is literally the exact same thing. Remember how we talked about the same, it comes back around? Like, I had my head down. You know what? Edison was ahead of his time. He just needed to jump forward, like, 100 years? And then he would have taken his invention where everybody's leaning over and getting a broken back because they're looking like this. And now they're just looking around. And they got this thing on their face. So that's crazy.
Like it's like your modern day VR viewer.
I get it now. Now I understand what we're talking about.
So what they did is they set up the film, and the problem with the kinetoscope was it took up too much space because the film would come through the machine and then go through the floor to the next floor below to an uptake reel and then come back up.
I can only see the engineering project on this. Okay, so I've got about 50 feet of this film. and I need to play it through this machine. Can you come up with a solution? Yeah, dude, cut a hole in the floor over here and cut a hole in the floor over there, and you're good. And he's like, cool. You got a saw? We're going to cut these holes. That's insane. That's totally and completely insane. I think the other problem with this theory, though, is how many people can watch that film at the same time?
Well, it's one person at a time can watch.
So you're making, how much money are you making at a time?
Probably 5 cents per person, I guess, or whatever it was back then.
And it literally takes the full length of the movie, which is only a minute. But what I'm trying to say, though, is the thing that Edison gave up on doing, he's like, no, I need to show it to one guy at a time because one guy needs to see it instead of doing projection.
Correct. The definition of a theatrical motion picture is basically you have to have a paying audience, and it has to be in a theater type venue
environment. I get it.
Yeah, and it has to be projected up onto a wall to a large audience, not one person at a time.
Right. But the thing is, the numbers are there too. If you're making 5 cents per person and you've got to run it 27 times to make 27 times the people money, I mean, that's a lot of time. Or you can charge 27 people a nickel and show it once. Yeah. Good math.
And Edison felt that this was the way to go and got too invested in that. And meanwhile, all these other inventors and filmmakers did kind of an end around him, and they beat him to the punch. And by the year 1900, the kinetoscope was pretty much dead by then.
It had film, it went through a thing, went through a hole in the ground, came around, and came back up again.
This brings us up to 1894.
Yes.
So why don't we take a little break?
Before this. Yes, that sounds excellent.
Take a little break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the year leading up to the start of the Lumiere Festival.
That makes perfect sense. Phil, break time.
All right, break time.
Get back to the program. We're in 1894, 1 year before the film festival. And what's happening?
Yeah. There are a couple of asterisks that we need to put next to a few people, because there were a couple of other inventors who may have beaten the Lumiere brothers to the punch, because there were a lot of inventors working on trying to get to the starting line.
You know, it's funny that you should say that, because I was just wondering about this, because we've talked about Eastman Kodak, and we've talked about the Lumiere brothers and that Prince dude that went on the trip on the train. We haven't talked about Japan. We've got like companies like Fuji in Japan. So all of these things exist at the same time. And there has to be like a company in Germany like AGFA. So like there's 4 or 5 countries. And so everybody has their own film stock in their own countries. But this is before all that. This is like we haven't even quite gotten to everybody having that yet. So don't think that this is the only history. That's one of the things that we were talking about. The point about this, though, is this is the first, what was it? It was people paying in a room, in a theater, with a theater venue with a projection onto a screen.
On the wall. Yeah.
And now, and once we've met those criteria, which is criteria, then we have the first screening of a movie and first film fest.
Which is the same criteria we have today. The only difference is you might have a digital movie being shown on a video projector onto a screen. You know, that's the standard. That's where it's been, and it's been there ever since 1895. Like the Lumiere brothers set the standard, and they even set the standard for 4:3. You know, the picture of 4:3. So for anybody out there that doesn't know what we're talking about, 4:3 is the ratio that your television was when you were a kid, my age. Yeah, the old television.
So if you have never seen what's called a CRT, that's a CRT, and a CRT, it has a 4:3 image. The screen that you're seeing us on right now This is 16 by 9.
It didn't change too long ago. It changed around 2006, 7. It wasn't too long
No.
ago.
It's not a really long time ago. But what I was going to say though is films and movies did change. In the 40s and 30s, they were 4 by 3, and then at a certain point they changed. And the thing that made it so that they could change, believe it or not, was not the film. It was not the camera. It was the lens. Because what they were able to do is something called anamorphic, where they take a piece of film that looks like this, and then they put a funky image on it. The image looks funky, but then they play it out of a film camera with a funky lens. So in funky, out funky equals a screen that you're used to when you go to the movie theaters. The screens that you see right now, a lot of them, like some of my favorite films, were shot on anamorphic. And anamorphic is basically taking a square 4 by 3 or 2 by 3 or whatever the film stock size, and using a lens to put an image that's like this on it. So instead of being like this, it basically gets stretched out like this.
So there was another guy. His name was Emile Reynaud. I guess he's French too. Emile Reynaud.
Everybody seems to be French. All these French
the
guys.
movie, so his film is called Around a Cabin. And what he did was he took film and hand painted the film and put images on the film, like hand painted each.
So do you want me to show it right now? And since we're talking about it?
Yeah. We'll show you a couple of seconds of it. So basically he had 2 spools of film with hand-painted images on it, one for the background and another one for the people jumping and swimming and whatever, and he would have to hand crank them. And he did a bunch of shows, and he has a couple of movies. You can find 2 or 3 of them on YouTube if you search for Emile Reynaud. And
that is awesome.
And but it was like we were talking about in our last episode about L. Frank Baum, who was also doing something somewhat like that, but it just got too costly and was way too much work for
well, this is basically for anybody that doesn't know anything about nothing, animation. This is anime. Like, this is exactly how anime is done. They basically do cells, they do individual cells, and then they put it on basically a film scanner, and it basically takes every single cell. And so what's old is new again. So this is 1894. I just went to see a Miyazaki film recently. Miyazaki did the same thing. I mean, it's literally the same exact process. You paint on film.
I just think it's amazing that this is pretty much the first animated movie and one of the first movies ever made. I just thought that was crazy.
I agree 1,000%. That's how he did it, and that it was that long ago.
And after a while, I guess his arms got tired and he gave up. But
when you see stuff like this and you're like, how does this pertain to my world? Like, the only difference is you at home can do that today. Whereas this guy back then, this was unheard of. Like, there was nobody doing this but like him and maybe 5 other people on the planet. Maybe.
So what disqualifies this movie as being one of the first theatrical motion pictures ever shown is the fact that it is just hand painted on the film. It's not like an emulsion that had an image burned into it, like what most movies are, that he just hand painted it. But it's very interesting that it was, part of this whole process to getting to the first theatrical motion picture ever released. So
I was going to say it's no different than today. I mean, anime is anime, and motion pictures are motion pictures. Like, you'll often see an anime go from being anime only and then being what's called live action. And I don't know if you've ever watched any anime that's gone from anime to live action, but that's some of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen some bad films, but for whatever reason, the anime is so good. It's just so good because they have the time and they can paint every single frame and get it exactly how they want. And then they go to real life where you've got to figure out how to get a camera to take a picture of that in real life. And the transition just, it goes horribly wrong. horribly wrong. I mean, I should say there are some that have come off good. Some of them have looked amazing, but that's like this hand, and the other one's like this hand going like that for a while.
Yeah. We have another asterisk that we need to talk about. Now, there was a guy named Max, and this is what I was talking about with the names. We might mangle a couple of names. His name was Max Skladanowski.
Skladanowski.
A Russian filmmaker who came up with these. He did his own festival on November 1st, 1895. Beating the Lumiere brothers by almost a full 2 months.
Did he not collect money or something? Like, was there like something he did wrong at his festival?
I don't know if it had something to do with the fact that he was it ended up being more of a private screening than actually a public screening.
Right. That's what I was saying. It wasn't a paid exhibition. It was basically like, hey, come on over and I'll show you my new film that I made last week.
Or the date was messed up or something, or got canceled. I don't know. But this
got rained out.
This guy needs to have an asterisk next to his name just because it's possible he came before the Lumiere brothers. So what Skladanowski did was he made like 5 or 6 movies, and they were like 25 seconds each, and he strung them together into a big like 5-minute thing. And eventually he did show it in movie theaters, but much later after 1895. But I felt he deserved an asterisk next to his name for being one of the inventors that almost was the first one to show.
I think I just saw this on AGT last week. I think this was like the second place person last week was this family right here. They almost won. They were really close to winning AGT. They almost got the whole title. It's amazing to me that a lot of these skills are still being done. Like, people still juggle. People still kangaroo fight. Not where I live, but maybe somewhere in the world. And then, of course, they're still dancing. Still dancing machine. But
we're still going to give the start date to the Lumiere brothers on December 28th, 1895.
95. Yes, that is awesome.
So apparently, Lewis went to bed one night and pretty much came up with his camera / projector / developer like overnight, and they named their camera the cinematograph. That's why we say we're going to the cinema. That's the myth, you know. I mean, this guy was really smart. I mean, he came up with the plates for photography like at age 17. So I'm like, damn.
That's true. I wonder if he dreamt on that one. So wait, okay, so first of all, he's been working with all these harsh chemicals for years, hasn't he? Like, I think I have a theory on this, because early chemicals for plates and stuff are like highly flammable, but they're also like, they're not good if they get in your body. Let me just put it that way. So I have a feeling he might have had some kind of poisoning. And then like he like went to bed, he's like hallucinations all night, and then he wakes up, he's like, I know what I'm doing next. And the family's like, what are we doing? We're making a film camera and a projector. How do you explain it though? Oh, well, it would be in French.
So now they have this camera and this projector and stuff, and they start shooting movies in 1895, like in the spring of 1895, and they started doing like test screenings and private screenings, and just trying to see how this new invention would work with the public. And a lot of their movies they shot in 1895, they didn't release until maybe 1896. Some of them made it into the festival, but yeah, there was a lot of production during 1895. Now, like I said, the festival was December 28th. You only got like 3 days.
Day before my birthday. I'm super excited about that, by the way. A day before my birthday.
You only have 3 days left in 1895, so there wasn't really a lot of movies from 1895, but some of them just got tagged as 1895 because they were shot during 1895, but they weren't actually shown till probably
at this film festival. That it was not the kids that put on the film festival. It was their dad.
Yeah, their father actually did it because he was like, we need to do like a festival right now, and I guess they were busy doing stuff. So it sounds like
cha-ching.
Yeah,
he's like,
no,
they weren't there for their own film festival. You told me that the other day, and it threw me for a loop. How were you not there for your own film festival? And their dad, I'm saying, he needed to make the bank, the scratch. The kids are shooting films day after day after day. It's got to cost money, and got to recoup it somehow.
It sounds like the parents were more into the business side of all this stuff, so that's probably why the father took, the
100%, 100%.
And then Louis and August, they were both Auguste. I got to remember it's
Auguste.
Louis and Auguste.
Louis and Auguste.
They were more of the creative inventor types. So the whole family together just put together this factory, and they had hired, by 1895 they had over 300 people working there. And
oh my gosh, really?
You'll see some of the factory in their first film. And this brings us to December 28th, 1895. When we get back, we're going to talk about all 10 of the movies that were in the festival, plus a bonus movie. But we will be right back with episode 14, Phil Meets the Movies.
Continues with Rich.
With Rich, yes. The Lumiere's festival was held at the Salon Indien du Grand Café in Paris, France.
Well, that's fancy.
They called them actualities back then, which is just a fancy term for documentary.
So these are some of the actualities that we're going to see.
All of these movies are 130 years old. Some have been fixed and restored to almost perfect condition, and then a couple are still pretty beat up. The French brought out I think it was the 120th anniversary celebration of the Lumiere brothers or something like that. Try and find the movie. The movie's called Lumiere, and it's from 2016. So these are the first three films. Workers leaving the Lumiere factory, The Sprinkler Sprinkled, which actually has a handful of different titles, and also known as and stuff like that. And then the Photographical Congress arrives in Lyon. So the Lumiere brothers started a ton of firsts just with this festival. This is a first also. Not only is it the first movie, it's also the first paid advertisement, because basically the Lumieres are advertising their factory as the first movie. And it's a great little film because you have all the women coming out on one side, the men coming out on the other. You've got the dog, you've got the guy with the bike, you got the horse. Here's another version of it. The Lumieres also invented the remake. They would make a film and then maybe 6 months later go, hey, let's try that one again. Maybe we can make an even better one. In fact, this one was made at least 3 times between 1895 and 1897 or 8. Yeah, so the Lumieres also invented the remake or the reshoot or the pickup shot, whatever you want to call it.
So funny. I think they're the first Casey Neistat. I said it on the last show, and I'll say it again. They just literally are like, hey, let's film something. Cool. Yeah, we'll just keep it in order. We'll just put everything in order.
And the Lumieres made this a habit. They would reshoot their stuff 6 months later and say, hey, maybe this will be better than the last one.
I know a guy named Sam, and his last name's Raimi, and he knows how to do that as well. He's made that same Evil Dead film 5 different times.
Now, I remember you did an episode of the TP show where you were talking about the arrival of the train that the Lumiere brothers did.
Yes, and people were getting killed in the front row. That's what they basically, the hype around that was that the film comes at the screen so hard, so fast, people are dying of heart attacks in the front row. And that's really not the reality, apparently.
Yeah, that's kind of a myth. I mean, they kind of were a little bit startled. Maybe they went back a little bit, when the train came to the screen, but they weren't screaming and running for the exits and flipping out.
And going crazy.
there was a news reporter that went to the festival when they showed the arrival of the train, like in 1896. And he said, yeah, people weren't really running for the exits, but they were like a little startled. They kind of
that was a complete lie. They were not doing that. That was not how they did it. Please don't lie like that. So that was them leaving the factory.
The next film is called The Sprinkler Sprinkled. The film is also known as The Water Watered, The Gardener, or L'Arrose Arrose, or even The Irrigated Irrigator. So it had
Irrigated Irrigator.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
Because they would re-release them, and each country had their own title or whatever for the film. And this is basically the first comedy ever made. It's also the first theatrical film with a plot. It actually has plot.
It's also got stunts. I mean, that's straight on stunts. And now they're going to have physical action comedy. And
your slapstick comedy started here.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, so this next one we're going to watch is the Photographic Congress. There's some amazing things in this single shot. First of all, they did a good job shooting this.
A lot of the Lumiere's stuff has been restored and remastered. There's a Blu-ray version of it out. You can probably find it on some streaming platform. They celebrated the 100.
That's the guy. There's the guy.
There's the camera guy. Yep. It's just great. I love all the lines with the dock, the ramp, and then the
bridge,
and then the bridge.
The perspective. It makes like a really weird kind of S almost, because it goes the bridge across, then the line across, and then the bridge across. So you've got two bridges with the divider in the middle.
Yeah. And it's a great movie. It's one of my favorites out of the whole festival. Yeah, they had a photographical congress in France back then, and they got together and had like a convention and worked
I was going to say,
rules.
I think that the modern name for that would be convention. I think that like if somebody was like, "Hey, I want to get together for a congress," you'd be like, "I'm not even in the government. Like, I don't even know what we're talking about." But if you were to say, "Hey, let's go to the convention and have let's go to the convention hall and have a convention," you'd be like, "Yeah, photography forever." And how many of these people are showing up at our photography convention with 3 wooden sticks, a box, a lens, and plate film? I think there's going to be like a guy. Everybody else is going to be like, all the kids show up and they're like, "I just got the newest Samsung phone and it takes the best pictures." And then this next kid comes up and he's like, "I just got the latest camera and it takes the best pictures." And then this guy comes up with this wooden box like, "Yeah, this is from like 1895. I just got it. I got it out of the historical museum. We're going to take some pictures." It's funny to me how the technology has gotten so that it's in our pockets and it's ubiquitous. Everybody has it. Everybody has it. So it's kind of weird.
The size of that camera compared to your cell
it's huge. Yeah, I mean, this takes better pictures than, well, that probably took better pictures than this pictures, but but you had to know what you were doing to take that picture. But you have to remember, there's a lot of smarts in here that does all the actual work. If you had to sit down with your light meter and gauge the light, look at the light meter, and then you had to adjust the thing, and then you had to know what kind of film you had. I mean, this is like, this guy probably had to pour his own chemicals on the plate. Let's be honest. This is insanity.
He probably developed it himself and everything. And that was the great thing about the Lumiere brothers camera, was it was not only a camera, it was also a projector and a developer. Like they could do it all in the same machine. So it was, and that's crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah,
Thinking
it is.
about it being the first one ever. I mean, really, that's
and it did all of it. Yeah, and then it broke apart into each one being separate. Like nobody I know. Actually, no, that's not completely true. With a digital camera, you're actually developing in your actual camera. You know what I mean? So you take the digital picture, you digitally develop it, and then you make filters and you do changes on it. So, and people are still doing these effects. It's just they're not doing them by hand quite as much anymore.
Yeah. So in our last episode, episode 13, we also got extensively into explaining my grading system.
Yes.
I try I try and grade on a curve, and I try and give more credit to older films than newer films, because after 120 years of movie making,
it should be better. It should be better.
Yeah. So you need to give a couple of points back to these pioneering films. And so I grade very high on these. And considering these are the first movies ever made.
Yeah, they're all A's for you. They're all A's.
They're
pretty
also
much
the best movies ever made. Like you wouldn't say, hey, that's the first movie ever made. Man, that's the worst movie ever made.
Right. No. Right. So you needed 10 films to start being able to rank anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hey, these are the top 10 films ever made, because there's 10 films. That's all that's ever been made. There's 10.
Exactly. You need certain benchmarks, and where to go.
That would be an interesting website. So the AI that's listening to this show, what needs to take and make this into a thing. Every single early movie, like even the ones that we were considering animation, they're not like painting on film, animation, all that. Take every single one of those early films, and you basically just start watching from the very start, and you start grading as time goes on. You know what I mean? Like, so this is the first film that ever came out. It's the best film that ever came out.
Exactly.
We have 2 films now. Okay, this one's the best. This one's the second best. And then 3 films and 4 films and 5 films.
Exactly, because the first one was the first paid advertising.
10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. Can't be any better than that.
Was the best comedy, and the first film with a plot.
Right.
And then the third movie was like the first newsreel, and it's of course a beautiful film. It deserves a 10, definitely that.
Absolutely. I liked it.
Congress.
I agree.
I have seen some translations that changed Congress to convention. So,
it makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure that Congress makes sense at the time. You know what I mean? I think it's just a history thing.
We'll take a break, and we'll be right back, and we'll move on to the next 3.
Sweet. So we're coming back. And Phil, I have been enjoying our tour so far. Go on tour. It's been a fun time going from one video to the next, but I think that you need to tell us about the next set of 3. So what happened with the next set of 3?
So the next set of 3 in the festival was Horse Trick Riders, Fishing for Goldfish, and the Blacksmiths. Yeah, so the 4th film that was shown at the Lumiere Brothers Festival is called Horse Trick Riders. La Voltage is what it's called in French.
I don't like the fact that the guy didn't actually show him how to do it. Did you notice that? He just went, Yeah, that's what you do. That's all you have to do.
I was a little bit confused with this one, because I
think they started it late. I think the guy actually did the whole routine, and then this other dude like, wait, hold on, I gotta film it. And they're like, no, I gotta train this guy. So you film when you want to film.
Yeah, and in fact, they've taught. I heard they have many films where it looks like they started late, because that's how hard it was to make a movie back then. You had to set.
I can imagine.
Well,
let's be honest. Making a film is not nearly as easy as people make it out to seem, and the reason being, it's not as easy as people make it out to seem is because what we were talking about in the last one, which is you've got the light, you've got all of the exposures, you need to know what kind of film stock you're on. I mean, like...
And on top of that, you have to remember you only got 42 seconds to 52 seconds, and you got to get it right on the first time, or else. Yeah. This ain't like a TikTok. It's like take 47, take 48. Let me put it in CapCut. I gotta edit this whole thing down now. If you screw up one shot, you can't reshoot again. Maybe till the next day,
or ever. Like, seriously, some of this stuff is like once in a lifetime occurrence. Like, okay, everybody get back on the boat. Everybody back on the boat. We're going to reshoot this. Everybody get back. So some of it's documentary filmmaking. It's one and done. You're either there live or you're never getting it ever. And I think a lot of people today don't understand that concept as much as they did in the past. The only thing that people all seem to understand the concept with is sports. The big giant game happens once a year, and once a year the big giant game happens. You know what I mean? There is no big giant game some other time. It's once a year. And it happens at this specific time for this specific amount of minutes, and then it's done.
Yeah.
Unlike today, everybody's like, I'll just watch it on the DVR. You know what I mean?
Getting back to Horse Trick Riders, it's pretty much the first movie that required stunt work.
Yeah, totally. 100%. So the next one is Fishing for Goldfish.
This is one of the first family dramas / comedy. And the only thing I could think of when I first saw this was, dude, don't put that 130-year-old baby in that bowl. Don't do that. What are you doing? By the way, that's Louis Lumiere, and that's his, I guess, his daughter.
Oh, that's horrible. That's just horrible.
Goldfish.
Don't drown that child. We will have evidence, and we will prosecute 130 years later. You can't run this murder charge, buddy.
She's trying to drag it off the table too.
I bet you she wasn't working for scale. I bet you. I bet you she wasn't working for scale.
This is the start of nepotism in the movie industry. Yes.
So this leads us into the third one, the Blacksmiths. Oh yeah, I like the Blacksmiths. I'm excited for the Blacksmiths. Let's watch this Blacksmith one. I dig this one.
So this is the blacksmith scene. What's great about this thing is eventually a puff of smoke comes out, and it just gives it like a reality. It makes it kind of like it's tangible,
authentic. It gives it an authenticity. Yeah. Before that, it was fake. This guy's just banging on a piece of metal, but as soon as he puts it in and the steam comes up, oh wow, wait, that was actually on fire. Okay, I believe it now. So that was the Blacksmiths. Yeah. Okay. So I think those were some good ones. I still can't believe you gave the Blacksmiths an 8.7. What's going on with this? The Blacksmiths get an 8.7.
What are you talking about? That's a B+.
Whatever. That was clearly one of the best ones we've had with action-packedness. If I'm telling you, Horse Trick Rider, I get that one getting an 8.1 because they missed the whole stunt. They missed the whole thing. Yeah, the guy was off the thing by the time they started filming, and the other dude never got it right. I was waiting for that guy to get hit by the horse, by the way. Whenever he ran around the back, he comes running around the back. I'm like, the dude's going to get hit by that horse. That horse is not going to... One of these times, he's going to be like, Buck! And whack him, because I'm sick of you, buddy. The fishbowl, like I told you, I knew you loved the fishbowl. You gave it a 9.9. Please. Family drama. I'm so excited. I just can't hide it. We've got 4 movies, 4 more movies. So these are the last 4, correct?
The last 4 movies of the festival that the Lumiere brothers did was Baby's Meal, Jumping the Blanket, Cordelia's Square in Lyon, and The Sea. So
we are so American, it's not even funny. Cordelia Scare in America, it's how you say it, and I'm sticking to it. I have no idea, dude. We've talked about our French. My French is not good French, unless we're talking swear words. I got some good swear words in French. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna watch all 4 because they're pretty quick, and then we'll jump back and we'll start talking about your grades for them, which is my favorite part of the show, by the way. I love what grades you give everything.
Now here is the first sequel. After messing with the Goldfish Bowl, it was time to eat. This is Louis Lumiere and his wife and their baby daughter, and it's just another well-composed shot. The baby comes back with the father.
Yeah, but the baby's younger. How did the baby get younger? I think it's a different kid. I think it's a totally different kid. Well, besides which, didn't he drown the kid in the last episode? And that's how we figured out that, like, we have the evidence 130 years later. Exactly. So. She better have gotten scale. That's all I want. I just want to know that she's SAG-AFTRA and got scale for this, because babies should get paid double. There better be a twin offset. Just kidding. I can't believe that they're feeding that kid so much sugar. That's just a big bowl of sugar. That's supposed to go in your tea. It's not supposed to go in the kid's mouth. That's horrible. Oh, here you go. Here's a candy bar. Now that you finished that whole bowl of sugar, have a candy bar. I don't like candy bars, Dad. Besides which, I had too much sugar. Mom, you eat it. Mom, don't you want? No, I don't eat candy. What did he actually give him? He gave him a piece of paper. Here's a coupon. Later, you get to go to a movie. There's the next film in the list.
So next film is
is this one Jumping on a Blanket by any chance? It's my guess.
Jumping on a Blanket, yes. And it's another sequel.
It is. We got the guy teaching them how to jump on blankets now. Before it was a horse. And honestly, I understood learning how to jump on a horse, but I don't understand this jumping on a blanket thing. I really don't.
Must have been a thing back then. I guess they did all these kind of crazy.
The only thing I could think of is you're jumping off a roof or something like that, or this is like part of like a tumbling. Maybe this is circus training. Do you think this could be like
maybe a fire drill?
A fire drill, yeah, it could be a fire drill, so that if somebody jumps out of a high thing.
Slapstick comedy at its best.
Yeah, they were killing it, literally. Those guys are all dead now. Oh, I love this film. I think this was one of my favorites. This is shot so well. And this is the one that's on, it's on that street in Francais.
This is the first example of an outdoor set.
It's amazing. I can't believe, I know that it's been restored, but I'm telling you right now that like, I see people's pictures today and they don't look that good. Like that picture, that picture is amazing.
That kind of goes back to the fact that these are just shots, and the lines of the buildings and the street and the horses coming at the camera. People were probably freaking out when they saw this the first time. This is the 10th film on the list. This is the last one. This is another example of a film shot outside, the first view of the ocean or the sea. I guess it's the Mediterranean Sea. Yeah, this one is really wonderful. It's like just like
a day at the beach.
First time water was on film, and the ocean and the sea.
Can you imagine living in Iowa and never ever being to water and not knowing that this kind of stuff existed, and now a film comes to your town with people jumping off a pier?
Is that what the ocean looks like?
I'm leaving. I'm never coming back. Bye. Yay, great time. So oh my gosh, Baby's Meal got a 7.8. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Jumping the Blanket is the weakest one of the 10.
What? I thought Jumping the Blanket was pretty solid, actually, but actually, the winner for me is Cordelia Square, because she was in Buffy. I'm totally into that one. That one gets the best grade for me. And I saw Cordelia in Cordelia Square, so that's definitely a 9.7. I agree with that score. And the C getting an 8.9. Okay. B plus, man.
I just wish the guys in Jumping the Blanket had practiced a little bit more.
Me too. Well, it seems like we did not get with the horse one. It seems like they had already done it once and they didn't get that on film. And then with the blanket one, it seemed like they needed to practice a few more times before they actually did what they did. So it's like, I don't know. It just seems like it was bad. It was not a fun time working with those actors. If I was the director, I have a feeling I would have had a problem with those actors, I think. But the actors at the beach, now those actors, they did a good job. They worked. And that baby, prima donna. I'm telling you, prima donna.
Leave the fish alone.
That was a good video, by the way. I'm gonna get that
Don't
fish.
put
It's
the
mine.
baby in the bowl.
Dunking the baby in the bowl.
So let's take a break, and we'll come back and we'll wrap things up. And I have one more film to talk about to finish out the whole list.
And we're back, Phil. I am excited about this next section. What are we going to be talking about?
So, like I said, all 10 of these movies added together is about 10 minutes of time that you need to
Not a long
to
time.
see 'em.
Not a long time.
So to make it worth your time and, fill out a half hour.
Maximize.
And what this film does is it basically gives you the whole history of the motion picture and how we got to this point. It starts all the way back with cave paintings and comes all the way up to 1895.
Wow.
And
That's
beyond.
crazy.
It's a documentary about the history of motion pictures, and it's really cool. It's very informative, and what's really cool is the fact that it did come out around 1950, so you get more of an authentic feel considering.
Yeah, it's not like it's not like the TikTok version. It's not like okay, 3 seconds, okay, go, okay, yeah, 3 more seconds, go.
So yeah, this is your whole quick list. It rounds it out to about a half hour. 45 minutes as a quick list.
Yeah,
And,
that's perfect. You basically,
mm-hmm.
so you watch the 10 Lumiere films from the film festival and you watch the documentary. Now, do you recommend watching the documentary first or the documentary second?
I recommend watching the documentary first.
There you go.
Definitely.
So people that are going to do it in an order, you want to watch the documentary first, and then after that, you're going to watch the 10 Lumières films. The French people. Yeah, them. Oh my gosh. So, you gave it a, okay, it's a B. Solid B. Oh, okay.
So do you not consider B good? I think B's awesome.
Well, like, okay, so
B is like very good.
Okay, so if someone's recommending something to me, like B is perfectly acceptable. Like if you're recommending a C-level film, there's a problem there. Do you know what I mean? And you have to also take into account that like at the top of your scale, your A is different than my A. We've talked about this because I have certain criteria for mine that you don't have for yours and vice versa. And everybody needs to have their own scale. So like that's one thing that you'll learn from watching Phil and me is that Phil has Phil's scale and Rich has Rich's scale. And like you can't like, and it's just like Siskel and Ebert. Like you don't go to an Ebert film if you're not an Ebert fan. You don't go to a Siskel film if you're not a Siskel fan. Like it's just a mistake. And if you don't understand the references, you're too young and you need to go back and learn your history of film critiquing, because that's what we're doing right now. We're film critiquing.
Rich is talking about the two most famous film critics ever.
So what I'm trying to say to you is if you like a film and I like a film, we might have similar scales. We might have similar things. Same with Phil. At the same time, I did not watch this film, so I can't grade whether this is an A or a B or a C. And I can, a lot of the times with documentaries, if you make it to the end and you're not asleep, then they've done a good job. If you're watching a documentary and you fall asleep, you immediately go, in my opinion, to a C. Like, oh, it was great, but it got a C, and I fell asleep halfway through. Now, I do have to take into account if you work like a 40-hour work week and you just got off a long week, and it's Friday night, and your girlfriend wants to go to a documentary, and you wanted to go see the Worldwide Wrestling movie. I mean, I get it. I get it. I understood why you fell asleep. But then there's other times when you, like, I sat down to watch this documentary. I wanted to see this, and I still fell asleep. Well, not going to do as well. So that's why I understand why you probably gave it a B. I haven't watched it. So, but I'm glad that you recommended it. You've recommended it, though, not specifically because it's a Spielberg-esque film, but you've recommended it from the you could learn something point of view.
And it's put together very well. It's a great film.
It's a well-made documentary on top of it. Okay, that's bonus points. That's bonus points right there.
But I can understand if, and that's very true. Someone's opinion of a movie may be affected because of the mood they're in at the time.
Right.
So, yeah. So if you are tired and you're trying to watch a documentary, you might fall asleep. So like I said at the beginning of the podcast, you can watch all 10 of these films in 10, 15 minutes.
Tops.
So, and throw in the origins of the motion picture, and you'll have, you know, a half hour, 45-minute quick list, and you can knock out 11 movies just like that and take it off of your Letterboxd lists or your IMDb lists or whatever you got. And
that's too funny.
But anyway, if you notice, I have this as part 1. I have a part 2 made up that hopefully we'll be doing, you know, later in the year or in the future sometime. And there's the list. There's about 15 to 20 of those. So you're talking about maybe an hour long again.
Not bad at all.
Yeah. If you notice, the first 2 movies we already did, the Autour d'une Cabine and the Winter Garden Program. But I put them on that list because I didn't want to mix them up with the festival.
Makes perfect sense because that was the original festival. They didn't have these ones on the original festival. Like you said, they were the asterisks.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I threw them on part 2. And then the Arrival of the Train, those are actually the workers leaving the factory where they did a couple of reshoots or remakes. The Arrival of the Train by all 3
of those. The same kind of way.
The same thing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So the train just keeps arriving every day. It just keeps coming.
Part 2 is just as quick as part 1.
Sweet.
movie started in France, so
Yep. I think it's that time, Phil. It's that time,
Yeah.
Phil. Hey, Phil, it's
Rich,
that time.
thank you so much again.
Bye, Phil. Thanks for having me on the show.
And everybody remember, keep your baby away from the Goldfish bowl.